Okay, now let's move on to some price controls as another example. Remember, don't worry if you haven't heard about some of this stuff. If you haven't heard about price controls before, no big deal. I'll do my best to explain it to you really well, and we can work on it together. And also, like I said before, if you're confused about anything, office hours are a great way to get a better understanding. You can just ask me anything. This class is for you to learn, and I want you to learn. So, if any of this doesn't make sense, office hours any day. All right. Okay. So let's throw in our demand curve and our supply curve. Now, and there's market equilibrium. Now, since price controls are another market control, just like the minimum wage is, part of this graph is going to look very familiar. All right, and I say part because there are two types of price controls. The first is what's called a price ceiling. The second is a price floor. And both of them, kind of like the minimum wage, require you to set a certain amount of money for the product or service that you're giving. So, just like a minimum wage, you cannot pay below a certain amount. In the same way, with price ceilings or price floors, you cannot pay, or you cannot make people pay above or below a certain point. Now I'll show it to you on the graph because it's probably going to make a lot more sense that way. Anyway, so right there and right there. Right here, this one is the price ceiling. Over here is price floor. Now it's weird, right? Because in a house, normally the ceiling would be where the floor is, and the floor would be where the ceiling is on this graph. But that's the weird part. I'll explain why they're different like that. And by the way, if price ceilings or price floors look familiar, that's because it was on the pre-test, and we'll be on the post-test as well. So a little hint. Whoops. Anyway, let's put in our price and quantity down over here, and then let's talk price controls. So we got market equilibrium, right, good old right there, with, let's say, this is quantity 1, price 1, just as a little variable there. So just any random price, any random quantity. Now, let's talk about a price ceiling. So a price ceiling is a law that's put in by government, just like a minimum wage, that says a price cannot be sold for more than this amount of money. Call that P2. Some examples. I don't know how much that you guys know about the adulting and stuff like that. I'm still working on that myself, but some things that could be examples if you guys know much about them is there's a lot of talk politically right now about the big H word, which is healthcare. And a lot of people want to say, hey, we need to make a law where you cannot make healthcare cost more than this amount. And let it be known before I start talking about this, I'm not going to lean one way or another. I'm just talking about the economics of stuff. So if you say Healthcare cannot be more than a certain amount, like some sort of drug, like let's say Advil, right? Not those kinds of drugs. Stop it. So let's say Advil. Let's say Advil shot up in price lately because a lot of people needed it, and because there wasn't all that much supply, Advil shot up in price. Well, what would happen is if Advil went up in price and somebody said, no, you cannot make it cost more than this amount. Remember, this is our supply. Over here is our demand. Then what would happen is if we put a law saying you can only sell Advil at P2, then this is where people would sell it, right? The supply would move down that much because, remember, like we talked about before, in this example, sellers want to make money, right? So they want to sell as much, or they want to sell more, as much as they can, of more expensive products and less of less expensive products, because price usually is a good way of telling how much people want something. The more people want it, the more the price goes up because it's really high demand, right? The less people want it, the less the price becomes normally. So the problem with these price controls down here is that if you price something, like if we price the Advil right here, then it's not going to be profitable for the suppliers. There's going to be no incentive, meaning there's going to be no reason for them to want to sell more Advil because it is only selling P2 instead of P1. So they're making less money because of this law, and because of that, they're going to want to sell less products because it's not profitable for them. Now, Now, the supply is right here, and the demand is up here. So the problem with the price ceiling is even though this many people want it, only this many people will be able to get it. So the demand is way out here. So right now, that much more people can't get it even though they want it. So no matter what you do with the price floor, that many people are not going to get what they want because not many people are going to be supplying it, right? Because it's not profitable. Now, let's talk about a price floor instead of a price ceiling. Now, a price floor is the idea that something cannot be sold under this amount, P3. So, an example that usually happens with price floors is, let's say you're a farmer and you want to sell corn. And the government wants to help you, right? Because we need to protect our farmers and all that. Like there's a lot of politics saying like, oh, we need to protect our farmers. Yeah, like farmers are very important, so we want to keep them in business. But the problem with the price floor is it's also inefficient. So what the government does to help farmers is they say that you cannot price something below this amount. And that way, your prices will be artificially raised. So instead of it being at the normal market price, it'll be forced up to here. So all of the competition, no matter what happens, all of your competition will be selling at this price. So you can sell at this price too, and you won't lose business for it. So that's the problem. If you move the demand or the supply and demand curve up here, what happens? But again, we have disagreement in the market. People want to buy right there, or people want to sell. Well, I'm mixing myself up. Sorry about that. People are only willing to buy up here because it's so expensive. They're only willing to buy that small amount, but people have enough supply, like the farmers made enough crop for people to buy that much crop, a huge amount. So what happens is there's nobody who wants to buy all that stuff in the middle because it's just way too high priced. So all this stuff goes to waste, and only this amount over here gets bought because people just can't afford it. So all of that is waste, and that is what we call inefficiency again. So both of these problems in the minimum wage over here and price controls over here, both of them cause inefficiency. And whenever you mess with the market, whenever you try and put regulations on, the market, instead of letting it be free and just meet in the middle where people agree to do a fair trade, then you're going to get efficiency. And the role of government is determining how much efficiency we are willing to take or how much inefficiency we're willing to take for a given cause. So maybe we're willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to take a little bit of inefficiency to get higher wages, right? But that's a risk that we have to take, because if we mess with the market, then we're going to be inefficient. So that it all comes back to that question: how much are we willing to risk of inefficiency? And if we're just going to let the market be and let people have fair trades in the middle right there, that is the most productive that we can be as a society. If we try and mess with the market, we get inefficiencies that become problematic for the market as a whole.